My name is Rene. I'm here to talk about Titanium and Alloy. Statistically, I think we're a little bit off here due to the workshop tomorrow, but who knows Titanium? Like, who has heard of it? All right, and anyone used it? Just you? All right. So, well, statistically, we're not that off then. Most people never heard of it before, even though Titanium has been around for almost 10 years now. First about me. I'm 30 years old. I'm developer Evangelist at X-Way Accelerator, the company who makes Titanium. I've started there in March this year. But I've been using it for 7 years already, so I kind of rolled into this position. I started developing when I was just 12 in 2000, starting at just HTML and then PHP and then JavaScript, and then came mobile. So that's me. That's my social media. I'm also on Twitch. Every now and then I stream me programming an app, but I also host a monthly online meetup for Titanium, so I'm also planning on hosting actual JavaScript meetups online. So if you want to follow me there as well, then you'll get more meetups. So let's start with what is Titanium. And most of you probably know React Native, right? You build mobile apps for iOS and Android in JavaScript. You compile. You got native apps, and not those hybrid apps like PhoneGap, where it's still HTML in the background, now actual native apps. So Titanium is like React Native. If you look at it at a level like that, both you write it in JavaScript, both compile to a native app with a JavaScript interpreter in between. But there's lots of differences, of course. So this is how you build an Hello World app. Pretty simple. You just create a window, add a label, some styling. I mean, even the styling is optional, of course. And then you open a window, and that's it. Of course, Apple will reject this app because it doesn't have enough functionality, but you have an app. So it's cross-platform, supported iOS and Android. We usually have day one support for iOS. So when iOS 12 came out, we had an SDK that supported new iOS 12 features. It's very stable and mature. As I said, I've been using it for 7 years, so I'm more in the role as a user than I am as an evangelist. And a previous company I worked at, I used it for 3.5 years. I built an app that's been downloaded like 1 million times. We rarely encountered bugs. So it's usually like very edge casey things, but like I think I reported like 5 issues in 3.5 years. So that's pretty good. But Titanium is also enterprise backed. That means that there's X-Way, the company I work for now. X-Way is a really big company all over the world. And they bought Accelerator a couple of years ago, and they are starting to funnel in money to fund this platform. So that being said, it's completely open source. It's free. Everyone can use it. You can just download it from GitHub and you can work with it. So this brings a benefit that because it's enterprise backed, we also have enterprise customers. And they pay a lot of money to get bugs fixed really quickly, and those get open sourced immediately as well. So if you want to use it for free, you benefit from companies that pay a lot of money. Accelerator is also still independent. Like we're part of X-Way, but we do our thing, and we want to make the biggest thing. And that's also why I'm hired to talk about it and not sell anything, because I don't care about selling anything. Of course, my boss does, but I don't. I just want to tell how cool Titanium is. So what about Framework X? With Framework X, I mean, there's React Native, there's Native Script, there's Xamarin, there's Flutter, there's a couple other frameworks. React Native and native scripts are also JavaScript based. So what are the differences? And that's actually pretty easy. In my opinion, and I've used React Native as well in the past. Like a year and a half ago, I intended to switch, but I switched back. Titanium is much easier to learn. It's easier to maintain. If you write an app now, most likely in 3 years, your app will most likely still fully work. There's a couple major releases, so there might be some features that you use that are deprecated, but usually that's iOS fault or Android fault because they stopped supporting certain features. But most apps can be maintained with really low effort. The Titanium also has much more in the core. I looked at the React Native list today to see what features React Native supports. And that list is, well, it almost fits on one screen in terms of UI elements. But if you go to the Titanium documentation, you need to scroll quite a long time to see what is all supported. And that's the benefit from being around there for 10 years, is that our core is really big. And what's not in the core are most likely in official modules, because you don't want to compile everything into your app. There are tons of official modules for maps, for NFC support, keychain, these kind of things, like the default things that most people want to use, but not everyone, so it's not in the core, it's in a module. So if you build an app, chances are big you don't even need community support. Like you don't need a community build module, or of course there's always things like if you want to use one signal for push notification or push boost, or there's a couple out there, then you can register that with your backend, and you can also use a module, or like, then you get into the area where we don't support it. It can be even easier now. There's Alloy, and Alloy is built an open source MVC framework on top of Titanium. And so the sample I showed earlier can be split up in 3 parts. So you have some styling, you have the view, and you have the controller. And this makes the separation of concern so much easier. Like you don't clutter your controller, your logic with any UI elements. Like this is everything that's left of the controller. You just open the window. Or in this case, get view is the top level, so window. So what is Alloy? As I said, the separation of concerns is really useful. There's garbage collection, which means like if you add event listeners to certain elements, then iOS is going to say, oh, you're using it, so we're not going to clean it up. But if you don't remove those event listeners, then iOS will keep thinking you're using it. So Alloy works by capturing those events. So if you close a window, then all the events that are bound to that window will be removed. Of course, there's always stuff like global event listeners or whatever, then you still need to clean it up. But most garbage collection happens out of the box. You can also theme apps, and that's the first thing I'm going to demonstrate. Theming means that if you, on compile level, you say, well, I want to use this theme, then you can recompile, and everything like styling, images, and these kind of things can all be adjusted automatically on the fly. That means that if you build an app for a company, like if you build an app and there's multiple customers that all have that same app, like, I don't know, certain governments or whatever, then you can just create different themes, and you can do the adjustments for the app just once, and then everyone can benefit. Like you can recompile basically for a different customer, and then your app looks different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to this. Here we go. So I have an app here. By the way, this fully works on Android as well, but I'm just gonna demonstrate iOS because I have theming set up for iOS, because this bar on top, of course, doesn't exist in Android. And what it can do here is I specify the theme here, and well, it's really small, but on the file list on the left, you can see themes here where I have a default and I have other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change here to other, and I have live view enabled, which is hot reloading. And now you can see that the top bar is no longer green, but it's a weird yellowish color, yellow, orange, whatever the color is. And when I revert this, you can see that it recompiles. And I just specified, if you go to that theme file, I just specified one property here. This is my custom flow, so whatever you want to do. But you can see, like, I just use the global, but you can do things with environment development, or you can do environment development on Android. There's quite a lot of levels of theming you can do here. So I just use bar color here, and this is used in the global styling of my app right here. So that's how you do theming, and this is a really basic example. Of course, I don't have any images themed, I don't have any other properties themed, like app names, translations, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that can be themed. But that makes things really easy if you have to compile a certain app for multiple companies, which is a very common case. Any questions so far? No? All right, I'll keep going. Then we have the extendable. Usually when you, what I mean with extendable is, like, if you want to use certain features in multiple places in your application, or if you want to, if you have an element that you want to use in multiple apps, there's quite a lot of options there. And yeah, I'm just going to demonstrate away. I think it's easier. So when I click on this label here, and I go to a second screen where I put a nice open source photo in, and this is not just an image. There's an image, and there's a gray bar on top, and there's a title. So I made this a separate element. So how do I include this? I just require. And require is something you probably know if you've done stuff with Node.js. It uses the same flow. Under the hood, it also just requires that file and creates the UI element. So what it requires the photo element, which is this. So there's a view with an image view, with another view in there as a wrapper, and then there's the name. So the name wrapper property has this gray background, semi-translucent, semi-transparent. There's a label on top, and the test positioning, of course. So this is an element that you might want to use in, I don't know, 100 different places in your application. And in terms of styling, let me remove this. It's not really like, there's a transparent background color. There's a couple of things of positioning, and that's pretty much it. But the fun stuff starts with the requiring of this thing, because I assigned it an ID here. And if you go to the styling file, and you can see the same element here, where I specify a couple properties. So I've specified the image file location, the width and the height, and the name. And normally UI elements don't support these properties. Like, there's no single element that supports both an image and a name property. Of course, labels support text, and buttons support titles, and image views support image. But these are properties that are sent to these different elements. So if you go to the controller file on top here, you can see that I'm assigning the image to a certain UI element. I'm assigning the name to a certain label, and then I'm checking for a couple other properties that I assign for positioning, basically. So whatever you can do, you can just change the size. Let me just do this on the fly. So let's say I make it 150 wide. It's very narrow. Of course, the height I didn't change. So if I do that also, then you have a really small UI element. And if I want to position this, say I want to do 20 from the top, that works. So this element, like now you can make some sort of grid. So if you add 2 of those things, now this one doesn't have any styling, so. And I'm gonna say bottom. And we have 2. And that's really the flexibility here. Is you can create one element here that you can just reuse and reuse. Of course, you see double properties here, which you can use a class for, just like in CSS. You can say, because you don't want to keep repeating yourself, right? So class photo. Not phone. So these are the same. This is the same. Still works. So now you can just use whatever you find useful. So if you have common properties like size, which is when you have a gallery or a grid or whatever, then there's common elements, and the only thing you need to change is the positioning and the element itself, the photo and the title. Well, not gonna play here. The third thing I want to demo is data binding, and we use Backbone for reasons like it's stable. It's been out there for I don't know how long. It's a very ancient framework nowadays, but it does its job incredibly well in Alloy. So I wrote a sample app for that some time ago. So I'm just going to launch that.
Are we able to include a frame inside the Titanium build?
What do you mean with a frame? Like
a frame.
An iframe?
Casual, general HTML frame.
No, it's not.
Frame.
It's not HTML.
Sorry?
It's not HTML. So if you want to include HTML, you need to use a web view. And then you can just load a website in there. I can demonstrate that in a second.
Okay, so it's not possible?
No, no. Right here, I have an example with data binding, and I'm gonna.
And workers are possible?
Yes. Yes.
So I mean, general workers and service workers as well.
Yeah. All right. So there's lots of comments here. So I'm gonna. Well, the collapsing doesn't help that much. So what this does is, so there's a navigation window on top. I made some filters which are not relevant in this demo right now, so I'm going to collapse that. And then there's the list view. A list view is an element that iOS and Android have. where I'm going to render a certain amount of items. So this is the item template basically, is like how do you bind certain properties. And this is the template itself, where you can see how the UI is structured. So it's really simple, like just a few with 2 labels in it and another few for the color. And the color is this circle. So if you look at this line, this is the important line. I'm just gonna make it a little bit more readable here. So here we are binding a collection, which is a backbone collection. There's a transform function, so for every element that passes through it, we transform it to a structure that we like. We have a filter and we have a data function which can handle refreshing. So let me see, where do I fill collection? Here. Oh, here I filled the collection with data. So just some basic properties. I defined some types myself, a color, an amount, and a name. So pretty straightforward collection. Like if you work with an application, then it's most likely like 10 times this size. But for example purposes, this is really useful. So you can see this exact data here. So if I say make it 1 apple, then it will say 1 apple. So basically it renders this collection. So if you change this collection on the fly, which is possible in a detail window, so I say I make it 2, then the collection says 2. So of course with backbone collection comes sorting and filtering. So I've sorted it by name right now, but if I want to say I want to sort it by amount.
It's like custom types, these types root.
Yeah,
you can predefine any kind of custom type.
Yeah, you see it here on top. It's just a variable basically. So if I sort by amount, then you see that lattice is on top. And if I filter by, I just want to show fruit, which are these types I defined, then you'll see this fruit. So this is, I think, for maybe 50, 60, 70% of the applications out there, this is useful because pretty much every app shows data from a backend. Yeah. So you just do an API call, you get the data, you put it in a collection, and if you have your rendering set up, then you don't even have to care how the data processes. This will just keep care of the rendering for you, the updating, the positioning. Like if you want to do positioning yourself with the list view, that's pretty complicated. But of course, when you use Backbone, then Alloy, which is the reason I'm displaying this, Alloy will take care of this for you. So that's the benefit of why we use Backbone. It's simple and it does its job, and we have full support of it in Alloy. Any questions about that?
The garbage collection is also working.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, how's it working?
Oh, so if you bind...
Because in JavaScript, actually the abandoned objects or the deleted objects are used to be...
Yeah, so here, for example...
Under the window, maybe the unloads or something.
So here, for example, I have a click event listener.
Yeah.
Alloy recognizes it, registers it, and as soon as you close the window, it will drop this event listener.
As soon as you close the window.
Yes.
So, but it's the same way as JavaScript does. Because on unload, it's evented garbage collection, evented garbage collection or recursive.
But if you make a regular application and you add event listeners, then they won't be cleaned up if you don't remove them. And then every UI element that references this will stay in memory. And so by doing by using Alloy, you don't have to think about this. You don't have to remove anything.
No?
No. The only thing you need to do is when you use data binding, then you need to, do I have this here? No, I don't.
How does Alloy know when I'm going to remove something? So how can it prepare or just
It listens.
predict?
It listens for that. If you close it, then it knows that the window is closing. So here, for example, if you close the detail window, then I'm doing also off, which handles the backbone. I'm doing destroy, which handles some elements. I do this as common practice. Usually, you don't even have to do that. So let's get back to this. So there's also with styling. You can target specific platforms. You can create classes. So you see a couple commonalities like the label styling. You see in all 4 labels. On iOS, I make the label blue, and then Android, I make it red. Of course, you can also do custom checks here. So if you specify a couple globals in your app, you can check with that as well. So there's quite a lot of stuff, and there's also a global styling file. So for example, if you use a white background on every window in your app, then you can just define the top 3 lines in the global styling file, and every window will be white. Of course, you can overwrite this. So Titanium is something that's been worked on for 10 years, and you see that on as well. Like we passed the 10K PRs this year. Most PRs are done by internal engineers, but there's quite a lot of PRs from the community. So if you encounter an issue or you want to add a feature, just submit a PR and we'll get it in. There's Vue.js and Angular support, which is in beta right now, but you can experiment with it. And everything we have is open source, so you can just destroy it locally and then do whatever you want with it. And this is an example from Vue. It works like you know how it should work. There's a different rendering behind it, and of course the UI elements are different than on web. But this will compile the same thing as when you have the same layout in Alloy. So if you're familiar with Vue, your website is in Vue, and you want to share business logic or whatever, then you can use that. About business logic, Titanium also has a built-in Node.js support. So any Node.js or NPM module out there you can use, as long as it doesn't use core modules. So for example, when I write a module for a certain custom UI element, I put it up on NPM. You can just install it in your app and it works. And then there's something I haven't touched, and I didn't put it in my presentation, but it's still very important. Let me go to our GitHub.
Are the types immutable or queries like a JavaScript way?
It's just JavaScript, yeah.
It's just
yeah. There's ES6 support. There's also TypeScript support. So if you want to use TypeScript, then you can do that as well. It just like.
Is there an adapter to TypeScript? A built-time adapter or what?
Yeah. So you can do a compile hook, and then it converts it to JavaScript, and then it works again. So.
Not immutable. So when I'm creating some object data or object chain, it's gonna be referenced.
Yes, it's just JavaScript. So as you see, we have 10.3K PRs. I should update my slide. I started in March, and back then we were below 10,000. It gives you a bit of an idea how much progress we make. This is a big thing for us. It's called Hyperloop. And we have a sample app. And of course, our naming is not very convenient for Googling, because if you search for Hyperloop, then then you find transportation systems. If you search for titanium alloy, then you find metal industry.
Yeah.
But we have this. And what is this? And this is something that's really cool. No, there's no code sample here. Who here has done native development, so iOS or Android? All right, no one. Good. So let me go to an example here. So I'm going to an Android example. So what you see here, which is ES6, this is not Java. What you see here is you require Java classes in JavaScript, and you can use them as if it were JavaScript objects, JavaScript classes. So the thing that gives you that helps you here is if there's a certain thing that's not supported in the core and no one in the community managed to think of it, then what you need to do is you go to the Java documentation of whatever you want to use and you convert it to JavaScript. And in case of Java, it's actually almost one-on-one. It's like, okay, I need this class and I can call this function in this class, and it just works. In case of Objective-C, it's a little bit different because Objective-C has a lot of stuff that's completely different than it is in JavaScript. But Java is, in terms of how it's used, it's quite similar to JavaScript. Objective-C has named arguments for functions. So there's a little bit more translation you need to be doing here.
Are you invoking a Java class instance, for instance?
Well, I personally don't know because I'm not a Java developer. I haven't built.
From Java.
Yes, but on compile, this looks at what classes you require, and under the hood, it will create a layer for you to talk from JavaScript to Java. So I don't know exactly how it works, but
kind of layer. It's creating a Java
sort of
boilerplate, like Flash boilerplate in the ancient days, 6 or 7 days ago when Flash was alive, and when we are communicating with the bridge.
Yeah. So
Flash and invoking functions to Flash.
Yeah. So that's how Titanium works. That's how React Native works. Is you write your code in JavaScript. The JavaScript actually gets compiled into your app, but the UI elements on screen are actually native. And so as long as you keep your interaction between the native layer and the JavaScript layer to a minimum, your app will be fully native and also perform like it's fully native. So what this does is this just enables you to call native UI, native components or native frameworks or third-party frameworks. You can just plug it in your app and you can use it. So there's an entire repository here full of examples. For iOS, for example, there is that's the wrong one. There's even one that uses where is it? Here, Gravity. So this is basically a mini game where all the graphics, the core graphics, and the collision detection and these kind of things, all work. So based on these examples, you can see how you can just use basically any class in Objective-C and Java. So that gives you the option to support certain elements without very advanced knowledge of the native. Then there's a workshop. It was mentioned before, which is tomorrow, right here, I believe. And I'll be helping you write an app, an actual functional app that Apple might even approve.
With this framework?
With this framework, yes, in just 2 hours. So I heard there's a bunch of people that already signed up for it. So if you haven't, I recommend doing that. It's free. And there's free food and drinks as well. So if you And if you already have signed up or you're going to sign up, make sure your environment works. I don't have the link right now to the workshop, but there's a list of requirements that are needed for getting this up and running. Certain Node versions, Java versions. You need to set up Xcode if you want to do iOS. You might need to set up Android if you want to do Android development. And of course, you can also do both at the same time. And if it doesn't work yet, just come to me. I'll help.
Right. Can you please show me that how could you include a worker inside this Titanium, regular Titanium, if you want to work?
So we have a module for that called TI Worker.
I want to build an external worker inside the Titanium build.
So this one will fire up a different thread. It's all native.
Okay, so create a worker. I put there the pages, echo.js, and then I listen it.
Yes, but still, this is not web. If you want to do web, then you just need to use the web view.
This is not a web, so that means what the difference between web view and...
Well, you have the web view is HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you can use if you want to use a canvas there, you can use a canvas or like Titanium.
Oh, I see. So I can use actually a frame as well.
Yeah, if you want that, then it's possible. But of course, if you want to use HTML, you need to use web view because there's no HTML.
Well, I can use a worker in this accelerator things.
And this is right now iOS only.
What's the difference? Only the JavaScript is available, but it's available in the web view as well. Only inside internally the worker, there's not possible to touch the DOM. But I mean, what's the difference between the accelerators view and the normal web views?
This is fully native. So
it's fully native.
Yes. So on iOS you have everything that iOS supports, and Android you have everything that Android supports officially natively.
So it's an additional support to the platform under the hood.
Yes.
But nothing else. So I mean, I can access the, for instance, the location object as well, or the navigator.
I don't think internet's very fast.
So it provides the same environment as a web view, but additionally it gives support for the iOS platform under the hood. Am I right? So can I understand?
No. It's actually native. Like you compare it to Node.js. That's your environment. You have a JavaScript only environment with no access to DOM, no access to whatever.
No, but it's no access to DOM. No. In worker as well.
No.
In worker as well. So
it's all native. It's all native. So there's no web related. So like I said.
So for instance, can I access the location?
Yes.
URL, but you said it's only native, so it's not possible to access. So that's inconsistency.
Yes. So if you want to use
location is web view related things.
No.
Window location, URL window location, reload is web view.
The location. In this case, location is actually iOS native location.
Oh, native location.
Yes, and Android is also native.
Properties.
Yes.
There is under location URL, which I can get, for instance.
So, so if you want to use a web...
For instance, the hash. I want to know the hash, to pass the parameters into the...
There's no URL.
It's not a URL.
No, it's native.
I'm passing,
it's a native
passing a message in a message channel.
Yeah, so if you want to use the web view, then you can create a web view like this.
All right.
And then it creates like, I mean, you could create your own browser.
All right.
But yeah, so, and think like location, let me see, where is it?
So it's possible to create a Titanium app with internally the web view as well as an XHTML.
Yes, but most people don't use web view.
Don't use it.
No. Like I've built a.
It's an overhead actually.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah. So I've built an app for a company a couple times actually, where they just wanted their website inside a wrapper, and then what I did is I made a full screen web view, where I added some extra functionality like push notifications, like geolocation, persistent login, these kind of things, I mean, that's a possibility, but most people just want a native app. But what Titanium gives you is basically the the same development speed or even faster than a website, but then it works on iOS and Android. Mm-hmm. So if you want to listen to the for location, it's fully built in. So and these kind of things here, different modules. So we have TI Map, which is map view. So it's Apple Maps on iOS, it's Google Maps on iOS and Android.
Physical location, but the web view location, the URL location.
So yeah, we have a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Any questions? Yes.
You wrote your styles in .dss.
Yes.
Is that like a CSS preprocessor or something?
The first thing I usually say about DSS, it's not CSS. There are some commonalities, but Alloy files, like you have an XML file, you have a DSS file, and you have a JS file, they all get compiled to a single JS file, and that's what put on in the application. So anything you write in the DSS file usually gets into a JavaScript object. But you don't have full JavaScript access, you can define properties that end up in an object. So that's basically what DSS is.
I see that.
Anything else?
Is there a way to get a t-shirt?
Yes. Good question. I don't have many. We're out of stock actually. So this is pretty much everything we still have. There's a couple girls and there's a couple unisex shirts in a couple different sizes. So if you want one, just grab one. It's this one.
All right.
Then that's it.